Welcome to this week's spiritual journey, and this week we are chatting with David Ditchfield, who is an artist, composer and author who also had a near-death experience which frankly has changed his life massively. So welcome, David.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us what life was like for you before you had this near-death experience?
Yeah, sure. It was quite a contrast from where I'm at now. I was living in London actually just before, and I was down on my luck is the best way to describe it. I'd left school without any qualifications basically, so I was struggling to sort of get my way through and fit into society, if you like. I was picking up work, doing manual labouring, which I wasn't that good at, to be honest with you. And so that made it even more of a struggle because I used to look around at the other guys and think, wow, look at that. They've just constructed a wall, you know, I'm on brick 3.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it was tough, yeah. And that kind of world I was in, I was drinking heavily as well. I was drinking far too much. So that was an issue. So yeah, my life was just pretty meaningless in all fairness, yeah.
So do you want to talk us through what happened? Because I read about your story in the Take a Break magazine and I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe you survived this. So do you want to talk us through the day and what happened?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, my sister was living in Cambridgeshire and she said, why don't you come and spend a few days with us? Because I was in a bad way, you know, emotionally. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I came up and I stayed with her for a few days, and a really good friend that I just met said, I'll come and see you. So she did. So she stayed for a few nights, and I went to see her off at the train station for her to go back to London. Helped her onto the train with a heavy bag, you know, just kind of laid it down inside, and then gave her a hug and a kiss to say goodbye. And I heard the buzzers going for the emergency doors to close. And so she was going, come on, the doors are going to close. And I said, yeah, no worries. And so I stepped back, but as I did, my coat got caught in the closing doors. And it was quite a good quality, like sheepskin coat that I was wearing. So it's quite thick. And so there was no way it was going to get pulled out, sadly. And I tried everything, you know. I first of all, I started hitting the two buttons either side, you know, the open and closed, but nothing happened. I turned around and shouted for help as loud as I could, but there was no guard on the platform, you know. In fact, there was only one other guy there at the time, and he was seeing off his partner as well. And I remember he just said, get your coat off, mate, get your coat off. But there was no way that it was going to happen because, as I say, it was quality sheepskin, so it was just in there and it was jammed. And I thought, and I can't get this coat off because of it was just on too tight, as it were. Anyhow, I banged on the windows, and that was my last resort, hoping a guard might come through, but nothing. And I just stared into the face of my friend Anna, who was looking right at me with a face full of fear, you know. And then the train just started to pull out. I heard the engines rev up. I thought, oh, this is it, you know. I'm going to die, because I didn't think I was going to be able to release it, and I didn't think I would survive. So I got dragged along the platform, and I lost my footing eventually. And then the train really picked up incredible speed. I can't believe how fast they actually go now till it happens. And then I lost my footing, and I just got dragged. And I went between the space of the platform and the actual train itself, and went down the gap. And I remember that moment. I remember looking up and seeing like the side of the carriage doors and seeing that it's almost like they disappeared into the sky. It was a huge drop. And I heard this almighty rip at that point. And then I just remember going down, and I just it was like being drawn into like this horrible, vacuous, sort of dark hell, you know. It was just, and I was just tossed around like a rag doll at that point. I was fully conscious throughout the whole thing, and I was just battered around from pillar to post. And eventually I found myself laid in between the track and the train still going frantically over my head. And I thought, well, it's not over yet. You know, I could get hit by some of the undercarriage from the actual train itself. So I just thought about the Indiana Jones films and 007. You know, I thought, right, that 007 would just put his head right down there, you know, at this point. So that's exactly what I did. And the train did move on eventually. And I remember just lying over and looking up and seeing this beautiful bright blue sky. It was a February day, and it was very cold, and it just looked amazing, that sky. You know, it was just like the contrast of just going through that and then suddenly realizing that I'd survived it was quite tremendous.
So the train didn't stop at all. It was just gone.
No, it took quite some time to stop, because obviously Anna watched the whole thing unfold. You know, she ran through the carriage and looked through the window and saw me go under, and so she assumed that I was dead. And she ran through the carriages, and I should say, and then finally found a ticket inspector, and so told him, and he managed to stop the train. And so she said it came to a halt in the middle of the countryside eventually, about a mile down the track. Yeah.
So as you were lying there, still conscious, I presume, looking at this sky, like, what was going through your mind?
Well, the first thing was I was just looked to check my wounds, because I was in absolute agony, and I just looked and I noticed that the sleeve of my coat was completely shredded and my arm was exposed, and I could see right through. You know, and it was just, there was a lot of it was pretty messy. And interestingly enough, I didn't kind of go into complete frenzy or panic. I remember actually gazing at myself, thinking, "Wow, that's the insides of my arm. That's how it all works," which is really strange. But you know, I was quite calm basically, and obviously I was still in survival mode. And I thought, right, get your phone out your pocket and try and ring your sister, get her to call the police and the ambulance, which is crazy because obviously, you know, by then obviously somebody would have seen what had happened.
Yeah.
And the ambulance crew arrived really quick. You know, the paramedics, and they jumped down on the track. And I couldn't use my phone anyway; it was completely shattered. So they jumped down on the track and they came down, and you know, they were working on me, and they finally got me onto a stretcher somehow. Goodness knows how, but they did do. And then they bit by bit lifted me off the track up onto the platform, which is really high. When you're down there, it's quite a drop, you know. And they got me onto a trolley and into an ambulance. And it was funny because there was actually a hospital just around the corner from where the station is based, and so that's how they were there so quick. But the doctor in the back said, "Look, you're in a pretty bad way. We could take you to the local hospital, or if you can hang on, I'd much rather take you to Addenbrooke's, which will save you for sure." And I said, "Let's go, let's do it." So I remember the siren going on, and we just kind of like, you know, went at terrific speed down the motorway, and there we were.
So you were still conscious through all of this as well, so being in the ambulance and everything else. So
Yeah.
What happened when you got to the hospital then? What did they say?
Yeah, so I got into A&E, and they were all waiting for me there. You know, they'd phoned ahead, and there was the whole team of medics and stuff all waiting for me. And I just got taken straight to this bay, and I just remember the sound of all these doctors frantically trying to save me, and you know, all their voices going around me, and you know, and the bright lights all in my eyes and stuff. And by then I was losing copious amounts of blood, so you know, it was like really, you know, this is pretty scary. And the doctor who was looking after me throughout the whole period, he was amazing. There's this guy called Ian Grant, and he was a consultant actually, not a doctor. And he was really caring, and he came over to me and he said, "Look, your family have arrived, and do you want to see any of them?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How many can you see?" I said, "Just send them all in." I want to see them all. So, you know, my family came through, and they kind of walked over, you know, two at a time, talking to me and stuff. My mother was in tears and completely, and it was so funny because my life before, as I say, it was always a mess, and so I always felt like it was me causing all the dramas. And I was lying there apologising, even though it wasn't my fault. I was going, "Mom, I'm so sorry. It's always me." So of course he's going, no, it's not your fault. But the main thing I was concerned about was Anna, my friend, because I knew that she'd just been through this awful experience, and I wanted to talk to her and check she was okay. So she was there, And you know, they brought her in. They'd sent a taxi for her, and the
Mm.
police, and brought her in, I think. And so she came over, and I was talking to her, and she was just shaking her head from side to side with disbelief. And I was just, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, like, "Yeah, I can't believe." She said, "I thought you were dead. You know, I can't believe that you survived this.
Mm.
It's unbelievable." So yeah.
So your family came in to see you, and then you were due to go down for surgery. So can you tell us what happened next?
Yeah, well, at that point, when I left my body, I found myself in a much calmer and warmer place than what I was actually in the hospital. Um, I- I felt like I was in a darkened sort of place, but in a really lovely, calming, darkened place. And I looked around me, and I could see these orbs of colours slowly pulsating all around me, of oranges, yellows, reds, and greens. And so that was really making me feel safe,
Mm.
just seeing those colours pulsating around me. And then the next thing was, I looked up and I could see this being of light at my feet, like an androgynous being that was radiating light from within, I would say,
Mm.
with this really calm expression on the face of this being, and also this beautiful white blonde hair, you know. So there's just very angelic look, and but I felt safe and warm within the presence of this being, and I felt like I'd known the being of light for all my life and beyond. You know, it was like a soulmate. It's like meeting somebody at a party for the first time that you connect with.
Yeah.
So it was very strong, and so I felt safe, as I say. I looked down to check my body to see how my wounds were looking, and when I looked down, I could see like this blue sheet that was just like covering my body. It was like a sort of satin, sort of silky sort of texture of sheet.
Mm.
And all my wounds were completely healed. And like my arm was back together, everything was there. There was no bruising or scarring or blood or anything.
Mm.
So I just lay my head back. And as I lay my head back, then I suddenly realized there were two more beings either side of me, a female form. And they were like, they got their hands over me, like healing my body.
Wow.
And the energy that was coming from their hands was just like really powerful. It was just like this beautiful, it felt like an energy of love,
Mm.
like an unconditional love. And it was all the types of love that you experience in your life, whether it's from your lover, your mother, your pet cat or father or what have you, you know.
Mm.
And it was all encompassed into one. So that energy was just like slowly pulsating throughout every sort of part of my body. And so it was great. I figured that I was dead at that point. I thought, this is it, you know. This
Mm.
I've passed on to death. But I was very happy with it. You know, there was no fear or regret. I thought, this is great. And yeah, it was at that point I suddenly lay there and I thought, well, what about my family? They're going to be still down in the hospital. They're already distraught enough as it was, and they're going to be completely torn apart now that I'm dead. You know, so I wanted to check on them.
Mm.
So I decided I'd look over to see if I could see them from my left-hand side, and I realised I was laid on this big sort of piece of slate. It was like a big slate sort of slab, like a big rock, actually, like a
Mm.
big altar. And I looked over the side, and when I looked down, instead of seeing my family down in the hospital, what I did see was this amazing sight. It was like this beautiful, huge sort of waterfall of stars that were
Wow.
cascading down, and all these stars, shooting stars, falling into the middle as well. And I looked down. I couldn't. It was going into infinity. It was going into one galaxy into another.
Mm.
It was huge. And I of course, I realised at that point I wasn't just in a darkened space at all. I was actually in the universe itself. You know. And so that was a wonderful feeling to know where I was.
Mm.
And then the other thing is, I felt familiar with it. I felt, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is like coming home almost, which is really strange, that feeling that I had. And as I pulled my head back round, I could sense that energy of love was like getting stronger and more powerful. And what was happening was, there was this tunnel of white light, pure white light, that was just kind of like coming towards me. And it was
Mm.
getting closer and closer. And this tunnel of white light was just kind of surrounded by these flames of yellows and reds and oranges. It was like slowly circulating around. And that energy from that was just so powerful. It was amazing, you know. And I was just completely overwhelmed by all this, and this is just incredible, you know. And I just thought to myself, this is the source of all creation. This is God, you know. This is not this guy up in the sky with the beard. This is you know, this is it. This is where it
Yeah.
all comes from. So yeah, so I laid my head back, and I was kind of laughing and smiling all at the same time because this was just so wonderful. And then at that point, I just suddenly found myself crashing back to earth, and I was in the hospital again, and there I was. You know, all the fluorescent lights were like screaming into my eyes. You
Yeah.
know, the sound of the doctors in the hospital, and it was frantic and so noisy, and it was just like,
Mm.
wow, it was just turn it down.
Yeah. So when you were in that space, did you feel like you had a choice as to whether to go, you know, because sometimes people say that when they've had this near-death experience that they can see the tunnel of light and they get a choice as to whether they go into it or come down. Did you feel as if you had a choice, or was it
No,
more just,
you,
we're showing you this, but you've got to go back?
I felt well. I felt like I was being drawn towards it. So yeah, I think I was being encouraged to go towards that light. So most certainly, but for some reason, something was telling me, or somebody was telling me that it wasn't my time to go into that light, and that I needed to come back and basically try and tell the story to as many people as possible through all the different ways I possibly could. You know.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading a book yesterday about soul plans and how your soul decides, you know, what its life plan looks like when it comes to Earth. And sometimes what can happen is, if, for example, there's an accident or there's some sort of near-death experience, then your soul decides whether it wants to return to the space that it initially came from, or if it wants to carry on to trying to sort of like with its soul plan and with its
Yeah.
purpose, and with, like, you know, with you channeling this art and the music and writing the book and sharing your experience, it does feel like this is your purpose.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's my purpose, and
Mm.
but I believe that it was all mapped out right from the start. You know, I look back and I used to have regrets. I used to think, oh, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I start that relationship with that person? Or blah blah blah. But now I realize that everything was meant to be, every single thing. You know, I was meant to bump into one person to bump into the next, for for me to bump into Anna, who I'd only met not too long before the accident itself. Because if I hadn't met her, then I wouldn't have been at the train station, and I wouldn't have gone onto that train, and I wouldn't have had this beautiful experience to be able to come back and talk about it.
Mm.
So, in fact, when I joined the Spiritualist Church for a while, somebody came up to me and said that she could do like a reading for me, and it was like I forget what it's called now, but you may know yourself, but it's kind of like it's not like a reading where like a card reading. It's kind of like it's all mathematically worked out, from your date of birth, the minute you're
Ah,
born, stuff
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And she came back. She said, "Look at this! I can't believe it." But she said she did all the maths and said that it comes to the date of your accident, which is a significant day. That
Wow.
that it was something was meant to happen on that day. On the so that
Wow.
was so that was remarkable. So yeah, so I believe in destiny, and I believe that all different things are meant to happen for a reason and stuff. So
Yeah.
I know it's an old people. Yeah, it's an old thing that your mothers always say to you. Well, these things happen for a reason, but it's true. It's absolutely
Mm.
true.
So you mentioned as well about sort of not fearing death. So do you feel that if we as a nation, as a society, etc., were more open about dying and spoke more about it, that people would fear it less as well?
Oh, totally. What I realise now is that we just don't talk about death. It's crazy, really, because it's inevitable. It's going to come to us all.
Yeah.
So why do we avoid it? Why do we? I'm not saying that we should make it part of our our daily breakfast and chat about it each day, but I mean we should at least deal with it and face it. And that's what I'm finding now. I've been now I talk to quite a lot of people who fear death, and they get in touch with me and chat about it. Who've seen my interviews and stuff.
Mm.
But also to help people who've lost loved ones and help them to sort of overcome that feeling of, right, that's it, my loved ones died and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, it's great to know. I mean, I lost my own mother last summer, and obviously it's heartbreaking for me to lose her, but it was such a comfort to know where she is and where she went to. And it's like, it'd be great for everyone to know that, and for everyone to sort of realize that death is it's not the end, it's the next stage of the journey, and it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you in the hospital for then? How long did the recovery take?
Well, I was in there for 3.5 weeks, but that was half the amount of time that I should have been there. And they predicted it would be, probably a couple of months. But I know that I was being helped by Spirit, and they were helping me along. And so my recovery rate was really, like, this consultant kept coming in. He was going, "I can't believe how fast you're recovering. You're amazing." He said, "Your wounds are just like healing, and your power of inner strength is just so remarkable." So, but looking back on it, I know now. Well, I knew afterwards, actually, at the time, that something was going on, that I was being helped. So yeah.
Did you have this awareness of Spirit before the accident, or is
No.
is it just afterwards, looking back, and then you're like, I know that they were looking out for me and they were helping me?
No, I had no idea at all. In fact, it's quite funny because just a couple of months beforehand, I'd been coming up to visit my sister just for a weekend and to see the family. And she said, I was on the train. That was it. I was coming up, and there was an elderly couple sat opposite me, and this lady turned around and was asking me where the next station was and stuff, And I told her, and then she said, "Oh, we're going to see a medium tomorrow night. Would you like to come?" And I was going, "Yeah, I was being polite. I said, "Oh, right, okay, thanks very much. I'll see what I can do."
Yeah.
So she handed me a flyer when she was getting off the train, this little poster, and it had the Julia night tonight. And she said, "She's really, really good." I said, "Okay." And it meant nothing to me, to be honest with you, and I wasn't interested in getting in touch with anybody to find any messages. I hadn't lost anybody in my life at that point, so But I went. I don't know why, but I went.
Well, you did go.
And yeah, I went
Oh, wow.
along, and I got this incredible message because she was pacing backwards and forward, picking people out and giving people messages from their loved ones who passed over, saying, "Oh, your grandfather's here, he's fine," and stuff. Excuse me. And then she said, "Gentleman in the blue sweater over there," she said, "Your life is about to change." I went, "Oh, okay." And she said, "It's going to be big. It's going to be in a big way." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen? And are they saying what?" And she said, "They're not telling me anything, but don't worry, you'll be protected." That's what they're saying. So I said, "Okay." I thought I was going to go away, and sort of, win the lottery,
Yeah.
get a new job, whatever. And but no, looking back on it, I know now exactly what that message was. It was warning me that this was about to happen, this huge event in my life.
So following on from, so you came out of hospital, you've recovered. What happened next for you?
Well, even though I was 3.5 weeks in there, obviously it was a couple of years of going in and out of hospital to get fixed and stuff. But basically what happened was, from the first moment I come round from the anaesthetic, because they rushed me straight to theatre afterwards, I was desperate to sort of record what had happened. I just, even though I could hardly move and I was in a lot of pain inside me, I was charged with all this energy, and I thought, what is it I've got to do? What is my task in this world now after what's just happened? So I decided I was going to do a painting. So that's how I got hold of this canvas. Like, I wanted to do a huge canvas. I'd never done anything like this before, but I wanted to do like a big Michelangelo style painting, like a Renaissance painting of what I saw. So I got this canvas, and I bought one, and in fact my aunt bought it for me, which was really sweet. That was really lovely. And so she'd just come over from Canada, and so she said, "Yeah, I'll buy it for you." So off we went, and we got this big canvas, and I started painting it, and it's amazing how it all came together. I was really nervous and reluctant at first to start, because I thought, I don't want this to go wrong. This is so important. I've got to get it right. But as soon as I started painting it, I'd sit back each day and go, "Wow, I can't believe I've just done that." So I realised that I was being helped with these paintings,
Mm.
because I went on to do loads. I was prolific after that.
Yeah, I can see there's one in the background. That's one that you've painted, isn't it? Is that one
Yeah,
behind you?
which
Yeah.
one? The one right behind me there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the second one I did actually, and that was and that's called The Beauty Within, and that's basically sort of showing what I was talking about, like realizing the workings of my arm inside rather than being horrified by what I was seeing.
Mm.
But also it was my way. I mean, despite the whole spiritual thing that had just happened, I also had to deal with what the horror of what had happened. The staring death in the face and then being pulled through that ordeal. So that painting was really kind of dealing with that, and that's interesting how that came together, because you may not be able to see, but in the bottom it's quite dark, and that's
Mm.
how I started painting it. And I painted me on the tracks with the paramedics around me, and that's all dark and oily, which it was. And then
Mm.
I started finding myself going into the light and bringing it up. And
Mm.
it started to develop into a tidal wave. And I don't know why, but it did. I thought, oh, right, that's going to be a tidal wave. So I painted that darkness going into a tidal wave and up into the sky, and bringing in all the beauty and all the different aspects that were helping me through my recovery,
Mm.
i.e. my music and what have you.
So in terms of the trauma that you mentioned, how did you start to work through that? Because like you said, staring death in the face and being in that place, the trauma must have been huge. So how did you start navigating, working through your own trauma?
Well, I had to have some therapy. I mean, they recommended that straight away when I was in hospital. In fact, they insisted on it. They sent through a therapist to start talking to me.
Yeah.
And initially, actually, the therapist thought I was coping remarkably well. She's going, "Well, you seem fine. You seem really good." But that's because I was so charged with all the energy from my near-death experience that I was seeming like I was very strong and coping with it all. But it was, in fact, it was about 6 months later that I suddenly realised that I wasn't coping with it.
Mm.
That me as this person, David Ditchfield inside, no, I'm not coping, and so I had lots of therapy to take me through the whole thing. Being
Mm.
able to face even going back to the station again, and so yeah, I had to deal with all that side of it all. But it was a great help having all this faith that I'd learned and all the knowledge that I'd gained from the other side, because that was still holding me up and keeping me optimistic. So yeah, it was a great healer.
So the other thing that came out of this as well for you was composing music, wasn't it?
Mm.
So it's not something that you'd ever done before. And I think you said that you'd never even written or knew how to read musical annotation, I think it's called, where you've got all the notes.
That's right, yeah.
But you've got these beautiful symphonies called The Divine Light. And to listen to them, I was listening to the three that you have on your website last night. To listen to them, it's as if it's from someone who has been doing this for years, who's studied, So how did that come about?
Well, I used to be a guitarist. And I say guitarist, I was very basically, I was playing sort of punk rock and roll bands in 3-chord wonders, and as they called it. And I was told afterwards that due to the damage to my left arm, that I never play guitar again. So obviously I was gutted by that thought, because it's a big thing. But what happened was, basically, when I was doing these paintings, these all came about because a friend of my sister's runs, her and her husband run like a yoga Pilates center. And she come round to my sister's at the beginning, before I started the painting, and she said, "Look, how's that painting going?" I said, "Oh, I haven't started it yet. I was putting it off." I said, "There's no room in here. I can't do it." She said, "Well, we've got like a studio space free for a week. Why don't you come and do it there and get started?" And I thought I'd probably do it in a week, obviously, but that didn't happen. So I went there and I started, and I got to the end of that week, and she said to me, "Look, you can carry on here. It's not a problem." I said, "But I thought, you needed the space back." She said, "No, we'll work around you." So I ended up staying there for 2 years, basically.
Wow.
So I know. So they loved having me there. They were fantastic. I mean, they're really close friends now, But
Yeah.
while I was there, people would come up who were coming into the yoga classes and come upstairs and see me. I became known as the artist in the attic, and they'd come up and see my paintings especially people who are interested in the spiritual aspect of it all. And one of them was a cellist, and she played for the local orchestra, and we got to become friends. And she said, "Do you mind if we use one of your paintings for our next concert poster?" I said, "No, of course not." So that happened. I started going to spiritual healing. That came about, right? And I was having spiritual healing. This came through the local church, and it was the same place where I'd seen the medium, because I was desperate to find that medium again. So I stumbled across this church eventually, and I went in there and I got chatting to them, and they say, "Oh, look, we do spiritual healing, and we can see that you're in a pretty bad way. Would you like to come along?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And in those healing sessions, some of the healers are clairvoyant, and they would pick up messages from the healing sessions, and they would say just very simple things, just say, "Oh, I'm picking up, that your left arm's in a bad way, blah blah blah." They wouldn't say that, but to me, they would pick up certain things. But they started saying one after another. They were saying, "They're telling me that you're going to start writing some music about your experience." I was going, "Oh, okay." So I went away and I thought, well, it's going to be a 3-chord song, but I can't play the guitar anymore. So I pulled out this little old cheap Spanish synthesizer out the cupboard, and started playing around on that. And like this chord progression came together, but it wasn't in that format that I thought it was going to be. I thought, that sounds really quite beautiful. So I recorded it onto a basic cassette recorder, because that's all I got at that stage. And went away, made a coffee, came back, listened to it back. I thought, no, that is great. So I just kept developing it, and I thought this should be played by an orchestra. And I mentioned that I met her for a coffee with this cellist one day, and I was just chatting. She said, "How's it going? What have you been up to?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I've just been working on this piece of music." She said, "Oh great." I said, "Yeah." I said, "It sounds. I reckon it could be played by orchestra." And she was saying, "Well, maybe we could do it." I was going, "Okay." And I thought, I'm going to hold her to that. So I did. So I went and I worked really, really hard just to pull it together, to get like a whole movement, as it were, of together. My brother, who lives down in London, he's classically trained, so he was helpful. He turned around to me and said, "Look, I've got this package and I can give you, and you can plug it into your laptop, and you can play your keyboard in, and then it will transpose it into sort of written sort of notation." Wow. So I said, "That's great." So that's all I did, and I just sort of worked it up, and then got all the different individual parts that I'd written and got them all transposed in through this package, and then printed off the score and took it along, and we all met for a coffee, and they looked at it and they were going, "Wow, this is really good." And they said, "Yeah, we'll do it." So they did it. And it was amazing, because I felt from the moment they said that they would do it, I was being helped again. I was like being encouraged for this whole event to take place. Because I remember they turned around to me and said, "Oh, we normally do some local press. Would you mind saying a few words about your piece to them?" I said, "Yeah, of course." So they phoned up the local newspaper and started chatting to me and asking me all about it. And I told them the story, because I said about my accents, and I said, "This is about a near-death experience." So they were going, "Wow, this is brilliant," And so the story became quite big rather than just a few lines. And from then on, the phone kept ringing, and there was other newspapers getting in touch. And then the BBC got in touch with me, and they said, "We'd like to come and film you, for a news item."
Oh wow!
So they came up, and they came to the rehearsal, the night before, and filmed the orchestra and interviewed me. And actually, it wasn't the night before; it was a couple of weeks before, because it sold out 2 weeks in advance, the concert, which was like brilliant. So there was a fantastic energy going on all around at that point.
Yeah, I did have. I think, because is it on YouTube where you can see the orchestra playing?
That's right. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
I was going to say, because I watched that as well, and I felt very emotional. So I do feel energy through music and through painting, and the piece itself, it just brought so much energy, and I was getting a little bit emotional and tearful. So I can only imagine if you've been the one that composed it, and then not even knowing that you're meant to be a composer. Do you know what I mean? Sitting there and listening to these different instruments playing your music just must have been mind-blowing.
It was. I mean, I'll never forget going to the very first rehearsal. When I turned up with anticipation because it's quite daunting walking into a room of a whole orchestra sat there. Coming from my background, I come from a working class background, so and orchestra is a different sort of arena. They're far more intellectual, if you like. And I just thought, oh dear. And I walked in, and the conductor just turned around and said, "Oh, David's here, the composer." And he said, "Oh, David, would you like to come and say a few words about your piece?" And I just bottled it. I said, "No, that's fine. You just go ahead and rehearse it." He said, "No, come on, come and tell us what it's about." So I did, and you know what? It's amazing. As soon as I started talking about what it was about my near-death experience, it was like I was channeling all this confidence through to be able to talk about it, and with ease. And I looked at everyone, the whole orchestra was like watching really captively and asking questions all about it, and so that was great. And then I just stepped back and sat at the side. And the first few sort of chords just came in to the opening movement, and it was like, oh yeah, it's just like beautiful. It was just like this. It took me right back to that first moment sat in my flat, with this little synthesizer, and hearing my two fingers on, playing that old synthesizer, and all of a sudden here it was, a whole orchestra, and it was like this surround sound. It was just three-dimensional. It was remarkable, yeah. And of course, the concert itself was even more of a buzz, because it's like my family and myself all sat on the front row. They gave us the front row, and we were sat there, and and I just sat back and enjoyed it. I was hardly nervous at all. I just thought, I'm just going to enjoy this. There's nothing I can do now. I'm not actually taking part. I'm not performing it. So I just enjoyed the whole thing, and it was brilliant. And then it finished, and my mum was in tears. She was going, "Oh, it was so beautiful." And she was hugging me. And it was lovely. And so that was great for me, because my whole family had been through this awful ordeal, and for them to see them reap all the benefits of the positives as well was great. And then my sister just tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "David, look behind you." And I looked round, and there was a standing ovation, and it was just like, oh my goodness, it was just like all these people just stood there, and it was just, wow, it was mind-blowing. I recommend it to anyone.
Yeah. So do you feel like this is where you've been shown to go to do composing music and art, and obviously your book's coming out on June the 26th.
That's right, yeah.
Shine On.
Yeah.
So I will be purchasing a copy of that, because I'm going to be interested in that. But do you feel that following this experience, the near-death experience, that you're being, I don't know, what do you feel is like your biggest lesson from it?
Well, my biggest lesson is that from the actual near-death experience is to be authentic to ourselves, and to really love ourselves properly, because in my near-death experience, I experienced all this unconditional love. It was amazing, and I realized that before I hadn't got any love for myself, and so that's why I wasn't moving forward with my life. And also to not fear death itself. That's a real big one for me. So I'm just trying to get. I guess what I've realised is that I was given my task was to get the message across through my art and my music, because you said it yourself. When you listen to music, then it touches you emotionally. So I'm hoping that my message will come through emotionally to people through both of those sort of mediums, as it were. Art and music.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will. Like I said, I listened to it and I was so touched by it that it's like you can feel when there's a particular energy that's put into a piece of music or art. Do you know what I mean? And you can pick up on that as well. So it's not just about, oh, this is the painting, but it's about that energy that's gone into that painting or that music or the book, etc. So
great, yeah, brilliant.
So if people want to see your paintings, or if they want to listen to your music, where can they find you?
Well, what I'd advise is basically to go to my website, which is called shineonthestory.com. And then all the links are on there to the paintings, or Instagram. I've got an Instagram, but you'll see the link for Instagram on there. And the music for the Divine Light, you can hear that for free. You can stream that through my SoundCloud page, which is also again on the website. So if you go on to shineonthestory.com, and you'll find everything there. So that's what I'd recommend, to get hold of everything. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, what I'll do is I'll put all the links anyway for where people can find you in the comments, so they can just go down and just click and follow you on Instagram and Twitter, etc. And thank you very much for coming and speaking about your journey with us today, David.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, okay, that's fantastic. Also, if people do want to read the book as well, you can find that through. I hate plugging like this, but people may want to know. Then obviously they can go to the website, and then and you can pre-order it through Amazon via the website. Yeah. Okay, great to meet you.
Okay, thank you so much. If you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and subscribe. And if you've got any comments or questions for myself or David, then stick them in the comments as well. Okay, thank you.